Hey everybody, this is Alnaj from the Direction You Empowerment Dynasty, and you're listening to the Unapologetic Woman Podcast, the show for women who love to live their legacies unleashed, unlimited, and unapologetic. If this is a community you would like to be part of, visit directionu.co/unapologetic. Today we're talking about breaking the self paradigm with my good friend Andrea Leigh Austin. Andrea from CPA Gone Wild is challenging the status quo in bringing love back into business whilst practicing metaphysics on the side. You really don't want to miss today. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Andrea Austin. So, my friend, wow, you are one of those women. I got onto the first call, I remember it, and we just kind of like went click and started talking about all the things and all the weirdness and all the crazy in our heads and kind of going, oh, I found another crazy person. It's so refreshing to have these conversations. And so I want to say thank you for coming into my life and thank you for coming onto the podcast. And I'm really excited to see where this conversation is going to go.
Me too. Thank you for the invitation. There's not many people I can pop into a room and play together. So I'm intrigued so quickly to see where the conversation goes.
And it comes down to that we are not like-minded, but we're so like-hearted. And so that's what I love about our conversations. I always think afterwards, my thoughts are allowed to explore ways of thinking that I don't habitually think in, because we don't agree on everything and we don't think the same about everything. And that is what's so stimulating about our conversations. I never know what I'm going to walk away from. And so let's get started. And I always like to start with, what does it mean to you when I say being an unapologetic woman? So let's start there.
Oh my, that'll get the party started. It's funny. I'm going to answer it backwards to start. I think that most of my life I have been way too apologetic for my presence, but often without even knowing it. So we wouldn't call that like it's not like I signed up and said, please, let me not be me, right? But I would say only in the recent years have I come to realize, as I look back now, how often I wasn't either comfortable or whatever I want to label it as, right? As truly expressing the real me. And so I did a lot of years, even though people don't necessarily see it, hiding my real thoughts or my real feelings. I buried them a little way too deep. We could go there and say how sick it made me. But as I came out the other side of that expression, what really hit me is it's being really comfortable in your own skin and your own thoughts and your own awarenesses, and not feeling the need to belong, right? And ascribe to other people's belief systems, which is so fascinating because that's how you started this conversation. Was we may not agree, but I didn't realize how much I was ascribing to other people's belief systems. And so I wasn't truly showing up as myself. And that's been uncomfortable, in all transparency, coming out the other side of that and strengthening that. It doesn't mean I'm nasty or mean or any of those other things. It just means that I'm much more solid in who I am in a room, and allows me to connect to people so much differently, because now I'm doing it from a different space.
I love that. I want to take the conversation to how sick it makes us. And the reason I want to take it there is because this is not really something we've talked about before. But as you
Mm.
were saying that, I recall, I recall a holiday with my now ex-in-laws, and they were extraordinarily set in their cultural ways and hierarchy. And me being me, I was everything that is wrong as a woman in the culture that I come from. And so over the years, our holidays there became progressively more and more strained for me until I just started going, just shut up, Al. Just don't say anything. Just get through the holidays. And I ended up in a hospital with severe bladder infections. I was peeing blood to the point where I needed to get put into hospital. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror, and I physically couldn't recognize myself. I was so not being myself that my face changed physically. I was shocked, and realizing how physically ill I was becoming by suppressing who I really am was one of my first wake-up calls. Do you want to talk into your
Wow.
experience of how you became sick in not being true to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a few elements that stand out for me. So my more significant wake up call was in my mid 40s. I had an out of body experience in the Turks and Caicos because I had been living the life that so significantly that where I placed a false reality on the outside of me and was not living, I use the word incoherence inside of me. And so I would suggest that that makes us sick because we're not living in alignment and truth with who we really are. And I can speak to this confidently. My grandmother, I see it in the female lineage line. My grandmother had a nervous breakdown at the age of 72 and was actually institutionalized psychiatrically, and then began to erode into Alzheimer's and all those kinds of things. And when I look now at the female lineage, right, within my family line, we were taught quite strongly to be kind, to give until there was nothing left, and ladies don't speak if they're not heard, or whatever belief systems, right? And so interestingly, I actually started getting sick very young. If people had got my fingers on me, and to be transparent, somebody probably would have diagnosed me with Crohn's disease at the age of 18. And so at the age of 18, my body was already showing significant signs of beginning to fail. I have a long history of a number of things and surgeries. And one might say that I wasn't listening, maybe. But I've learned that there's a significant correlation between the emotions that I carried in my life and held inside, to the point where I understand what you're saying. I didn't know myself anymore. And so the out of body experience, like you, I hovered above my body. It was like my soul was yelling down, "Are you happy?" And clearly the answer was no. But what's interesting and really important, I think, to share is that when we make the conscious choice, which I finally did in my 40s, to not follow that anymore, however you describe it, I'll call it the universe in the moment. The universe began to bring to me things very quickly when I made the conscious choice that I wasn't going to follow that path anymore. And so I could give you lists. I mean, I'm happy to explain the interesting things that I've been through in the physical form, right down to major surgery 9 weeks before I got married, and didn't really listen, right, to what was going on, because I wanted to fit in the box so badly, Al, that I really thought that fitting in that box and being what everybody else thought I should be would make me happy. And I was literally dying inside. And so 4 years ago, I had my 50th birthday and had an awareness that if I had not chose differently, I probably wouldn't be here today, because the body will only put up with so much misalignment before it kicks us in the ass. And mine was kicking pretty hard at a pretty young age. So I get it.
And I sometimes feel that there's still an undervalue of the connection of all of that. And I remember I had suicidal depression, and I was out running one day, and there was this image in my head of myself in a casket that I had buried under the ground, and she
Wow.
was so desperate to come out. And in that moment, I had the realization that depression is actually suppression of self. And, from there, I went into physically abusing myself with sports, and like you, my body kept on trying to tell me, yo, like, you're out of alignment here. This isn't working. And still wanted to hold on so dearly to that persona of being a successful, high achieving, ass kicking woman that society has put onto a pedestal at this time for us. And I did my last Ironman with literally my uterus falling out of my body because it was so heavy with cysts. I couldn't finish my last Ironman. And then I went and did the operation, and true as God, 10 days later, I was out running freaking 20 kilometers because I would not be stopped. And my body just kept on going, are you kidding me? Like, how much do you want me to show you that it's time for you to choose differently? But it's addictive. Like, the high achiever persona is addictive, and I think that we underestimate that to a large degree, especially as women, and especially now with the motivational industry and all of this rah, you have to be a warrior, and you have to outwork everybody, and you have to overcome, and you have to feel the fear and do it anyway. And I used to say that shit as well, right? So I get it. But man, like, when you choose to not belong, and I actually want to talk into that because I hear this in the personal and spiritual industries all the time. We all need to belong. And I think that is part of that fear consciousness, right? That has us go, I will cut off my toes to fit into the glass slipper so that I can belong in the fairy tale.
Oh my God, that's so awesome.
Like, when did you realize that the belonging story is a fable of horse manure?
It's funny. So morning coffee this morning, we actually brought up the use of the word community, and have decided I want to kill that word. And I couldn't explain why, but you just did a beautiful articulation, because that word is overused, because, and I'll answer your question, because there is this sense that's so deeply driven into the human psyche or the human whatever, that feels we need to belong to be complete. And to be honest, I don't know if there's a deep aha moment. I'll see if I bring one back, but I feel like my whole life, I never strove for that, but didn't understand why I didn't belong. So I suspect there's a bit of an inner knowing within me, because anytime I tried to, it didn't last very long. I would get bored or move on or do something else. So, and even when we started our work, people like, oh, you're leading a community. And I'm like, those words just make me want to hurl. And I couldn't explain why. I would say only in the last month, where we were having a conversation, did the understanding of what that means for me make more sense than anything. So I'll go a little metaphysical in the moment. But if you go to some of the discussions around spirituality, as an example, they say that we're all one, we're all part of everything. Well, that's great when we're out in the ethers. But I don't think we came into this world to be human, to be one. I think its magic is we actually get an opportunity to express who we really are, the essence of who we are. And so we've gotten confused and mixed up, because I think for me, I was trying to fill a hole inside of myself, right? Thinking that I needed to belong to something else to complete me, instead of realizing the fucking magic, right, is to find myself and my belief systems and what I want to experience in this life. And then connecting. So we're going to call it the human connective. We're getting rid of the word community, right? To be able to connect to individuals from that space. I can't say, to answer your question, there's a particular moment that stands out. It's been an observation and transition for me to really come to that conclusion on my own by watching and witnessing. You know, I 22 years in a large accounting firm, and like there was a big joke, right? You had blue blood running through your veins when you'd stayed long enough. Like we're talking 20, 30, 40 years in the organization, and you were proud to do that, right? So that's one way of belonging. And then when I moved out into the consciousness space, or exploring metaphysics and spirituality, right, and its practical application, I kept seeing the same thing. It was all these groups that wanted to create community. We have to have community. And I disagree. That's why you and I seem to connect so really well. Is it's not that we don't want to connect to other people, but we don't want to have to belong. We want to connect through a wholeness. That's where real life and real essence and connection. And I didn't always know that. So that's how that is translated for me, and speaks to my truth, because the rest just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's so fascinating to me how I've never belonged, and it's never really worried me that I didn't belong, because I'm having so much fun with myself. I have a lot of things in my head that's going on all of the time. I find myself fascinating and fabulous at the same time. And then, of course, you know, still self-critical and all of the other juicy things. But we had a meeting yesterday with the Unapologetic Initiative, and I started the meeting and I said, I'm really tired of being called the leader of this group, and it doesn't sit well with me, and it doesn't connect for me at all. I said, and I really had to think about this, and I am happy to come in as the hostess and have an amazing, fabulous time with my friends, but I am not anybody's leader, because
Right.
I believe in self-leadership. And so for me, even all the words at the moment that people are using to death, I'm looking at them going, none of them are resonating for me anymore. Probably haven't for a very, very long time. And it's interesting how people like us are taking the time to pull this apart. And I want to go to the conversation about language, because we started having this conversation, and I think this is critical at this time, of us continuously being requested to dumb down the language, to dumb down language so other people can understand us. And I am blown away by that, because I'm going, well, isn't it time that we start freaking elevating language in this world, and start questioning language, and start bringing in new language? And if people don't understand what the fuck we're talking about, let them ask and enrich themselves, instead of us taking people and say, you have to dumb it down. Like, let's go on to the dumb it down freaking conversation that is. I'm so sick of being told to dumb myself down so a 5-year-old can understand me. Like, if I want to have a conversation with a 5-year-old, I'll talk about cookies. Let's go.
Or I'll have a conversation with a 5-year-old because I enjoy their experience.
Yes.
But if I'm sharing, yeah, no. You know, it's funny when you use that language, what's happening right now is I'm getting flashbacks of my whole childhood, even my university career, even in corporate, where I would say things and people would look at me cross-eyed. And so I started to believe that I had to dumb it down because nobody was gonna fucking get me. And you know, then you get into the stories of why do people need to get you, which is a totally different discussion. But, you know, this conversation was stemmed because you and I had a conversation last week where I was connecting with somebody, like genuinely sharing. She had asked about our work and what we've been up to in the world. And she looked at me and said, well, if that's what you're going to present to the group, we're going to lose half of them. Like, I needed to concede to the group that I was presenting to. Now, I understand reading body language and facilitating connection through conversation. I mean, Jesus Christ, I taught taxation at the University of Toronto. If anybody can take fucking complex topics, right, and be able to relay them in a way that allows people to accept them, I can. So what I feel like is I have spent a lot of my life trying to dumb things down or simplify them for people, which I can do, okay? But I don't want to do it anymore unless people are genuinely interested. And so when I had this opportunity, this conversation with this woman, I said to her, listen, I'll come into the room. I can't commit to what's going to come out of my mouth because I just trust. But what I'd like to do within your group, if there's time and space, is to get people to get curious and ask questions so that we're not used to, I think, when we don't understand something, we can often go into reflexive patterns where we either project on the other individual that they've got to dumb it down for me, or we can't digest it, or we can't understand it. And I get it, because I feel like sometimes there's a part of us that goes into child confused mode. Well, if I don't understand you, then I must be stupid. And, oh, I can't act like that as an adult. And I can't tell you I don't understand a goddamn word that's coming out of your mouth, right? Because that can happen, right? But what I feel in the discussion between us and I'm seeking is then curious spaces to be able to actually ask, like, I don't understand a word of what you said. Can you elaborate on this? And see if we can then learn to connect that way rather than having to adjust and modify to each other's belief systems or language. And we're just not used to doing that. And I love the opportunity when we had the conversation to create more spaces where we can learn from each other in that way, without having to simplify or, you know, dumb it down or modify who we really are.
And it comes down to that word curiosity for me. And I'm a super curious person. So it's not that I want to necessarily agree with the other person who's speaking. I want to understand their thinking patterns, and I want to understand their worldview without necessarily having to change my own. And I think that that's probably one of the winning elements for me personally, in not being ashamed to go, I don't know what the hell you just said. Like, can you get me to, like, just get there? But then again, you know, we were having the meeting yesterday as well, and I'm probably one of the very few people who don't mind looking like a fool all of the time. In fact, I go out and do it physically on my bike and fall down and look like a complete twat on the golf course because I suck. And I'll pick up my ball and throw it with no shame, like, because, like, what the hell, it's just a game, people, right? But it's like, because I'm so curious about people, not necessarily their their beliefs. Like, I don't necessarily need to understand their beliefs, but I so am curious about the person that it's fun for me to go, I don't get this. Like walk me through your process so I can see from behind your eyes almost, right? And it's that brings a richness of life to me, is that really wanting to be curious about how other people are experiencing life, and then question my own thing. I go out to prove myself wrong all the time, because I'm always like, but what if that's bullshit, Al? Like even the beginning of this year, I was like, what if you took all your own personal little rules for self and you burned the list and there were no rules for you to live by? What the fuck would you do then? And it's fun, right? It's fun, but it does take an extraordinarily amazing sense of humor about self, not taking yourself so serious, and not being necessarily needing to be seen a specific way by people.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings me to the next little juicy word, which is expert. And I've been having this conversation, well, mainly with myself to start off with, and then starting to have this conversation with other people. We have this expert saturated society at the moment. Everybody wants to call themselves an expert. And I did that for a while as well. And here's the kicker that I found. When I call myself an expert, I have to stand by what I say all the time. And it doesn't leave room for going, what if I'm wrong? What if there is another possibility for that for me? And so I've released the word expert, but I find it fascinating to see how society is clinging to that, and how much of people's power they're giving away because of what the experts are saying to them.
Yeah, we could probably talk for hours. Let's see if I can simplify this one. It segues to something I wanted to add to. So I'll bridge both. So two things that stand out for me. I wasn't always a naturally, or if I was, I lost it quick, a curious person. So this has been, and the sense of humor has finally come back. So I was the serious type A expert. So it's hilarious that we're having this conversation. And I built my entire egoic personification around that. I mean, yeah, we could have great laughs, right? So I understand what you're saying. And it was heavy. It was really heavy. I built my world around thinking I knew that I had to be right, that there was a box to put everything in. And going back to the beginning of the conversation, it almost killed me. And so then I met this gorgeous divine man that I'm hanging out with now, and a technology that we don't need to talk about today. But his MO was completely, I don't know. And he was so refreshing that I went, seriously, you don't know? Like, seriously. And what I realized is that living a life that's the opposite of being the expert, and then we'll go to the empowerment piece, is fucking liberating, because then it becomes an exploration of your truth almost every minute of every day. Because Lord knows when the next day you wake up, you're going to throw out everything you think you knew the day before, because that's where the excitement, the connection, and the richness lies in our lives. And I didn't know that. So when you get to, experts, right? Thank you for this. So I've spent the last couple of years navigating in the networking space. And there's a lot of personifications around being the expert. And I get it. Might be certain times, when we're talking about taxation, that you might want to go to the expert. You don't really want to figure that out. But maybe you do. Mm-hmm. And what I agree with you is we often employ or hire experts because we're not willing to trust ourselves. So that's very different from hiring somebody to do something for you because you're instincts tell you that this individual can assist you with, let's use mine, right? With your tax return, because you really don't want to have to learn it. If you do, that's cool. But what I'm teaching my sons in the moment is they still need to learn it. They need to know the basics, that if you're going to come from life from an empowered state, you don't need to be the expert in everything, but you want to empower yourself to have an inner knowing on how to navigate your life. And we are like, trust me, I've had so many people approach me and tell me that they can't understand what we do for a living, and that I need to hire the expert so that they can tell me, and then I'll be able to market myself. But the truth is, until I really know myself, no expert in the world is really going to be able to help me. And that absolutely goes against the grain of most of what's being shared out into the world. And I think it's one thing to play with an expert from an empowered state. It's another to play with an expert from a disempowered state. And most of our reactions are from a disempowered state. They're not from that place of wholeness and love. So yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it. When I walked away from my career over 10 years ago, I decided to let go of my accounting designation. And I make jokes. I think I had more education than a doctor and a lawyer. And I really prided myself on being that for other people. But going back to the conversation of, it almost killed me. Yeah. Because I was wearing a personification that isn't truth. We're all experts in our own lives. That's really the gig I see. It doesn't mean we don't have friends, connections, and others that can elevate us up and help us and give us a helping hand. But you're right, we're giving our power away. So I love the use or the de-use of that word. I am with you.
Well, because I'm discovering more and more, and I still go into moments of doubt, and then I go to the experts, even though life keeps on showing me that I'm the broken cookie. And I really am the broken cookie. When I was, competing in cycling and stuff, I worked with the experts, and whatever they did with everybody else did not work with me. I was the antithesis of everything that their expertise told them. And even now with branding and marketing, every time that I go back and work with one of the experts, and I'm not taking away from them at all, because they work for 99% of the population, but we are not the 99% of the population. And every time that they attempt to take what I do and put it into their expert formulas, it doesn't work, because I don't do what industry does. And so every time that you take the broken cookies and try and put them into the same recipe, the broken cookies don't taste good. And we give people the runs, not in a good way. Although most of them probably are a little constipated and can use a little bit of our runniness. This conversation's going in the wrong way. Okay, right? It's like the experts are the experts on the norm of mass consciousness in humans at the moment. And I just feel like some of us need to acknowledge that we're not here as part of the normal mass consciousness humanness. Right. And if we aren't part of that, the experts don't know how to actually even work with us. And this is when it gets fun for me, because I get to play with my peers and their genius gifts. And my peers' genius gift is exploring what hasn't been done yet, what hasn't worked yet. And we're unafraid to play and fail, and play and mess it up, and play because there's no ultimate failure. It's only like playfulness for us at this time. And that is when life for me became fun, was kind of going, the experts, no. The weirdos, the crazy motherfuckers, the unspoken ones who are dwelling in darkness and kind of going, oh, this is fun, look at all the chaos, like what are we going to make with this? Those are the people that I really work well with, both as my peers and my clients and my friends. And then it's all just friendship, right? It's like business is only built on friendship and through friendship and with friendship, which was a game changer for me.
Wow, there's a lot in there, but to sum the last part up is that's one of the deeper realizations I've had just this year. So my background, like you, was in business, and most of that business was based 99.9% of it on a faulty foundation. And so I truly believe that business is part of life. It's part of connection, but we've made it something falsified and separate from ourselves. And so I realized that the true essence, right, of being able to create a business is really creating a network of connections and people that you genuinely enjoy, and then allowing and watching what unfolds from there, rather than trying to force it into a certain relationship. And we're not taught that in a business. We like, I have an example. We come into a business meeting, let's call it that, and we come in with our agenda, because that's what we've been taught, right? Like, I have to sell you a product, or I have to make you think like me, or I have to ascribe to your belief systems, which many of the corporations are doing right now. And I get it, right? Like, I'm not knocking it. But true connection is when we can come into the room and actually get to know each other and see if there's a natural creation or synergy or something fucking fun to do together. And this, again, took me time, because I was so entrained into going into a room and following my own agenda, per se, that I was missing the goodies in the room. Because you go in a box, you present in a box, you miss all the candy that's actually sitting there to connect. And typically what I've realized or recognized within myself is that it's because I'm coming into the room, again, back to unapologetic, insecure within myself. And so if I try to feed off other people's candy box, which can give you diarrhea, so I might as well get right back to that. Rather than feeding myself. And it's really obvious that when you can operate from that different perspective, there's an opportunity to live and do business and have life from a significantly different lens. But like you said, I've only found so many that get this so far. So we're playing together for a reason, because there's got to be more that understand and get that, who want to break the paradigm of how we think we should be doing business and exchange.
And one of the words that I've been sitting with as well is, it's not that we wanting to break the paradigm for the sake of breaking the paradigm. It's breaking the paradigm because it just doesn't fit moving forward.
100%.
It's like I always say, I'm not a leader because I want to be a leader. I'm a leader because I can't follow. So that's why I'm a self-leader. Follow does not compute in my brain. Being obedient, rules, they don't apply to me because rules just don't compute in my brain, And so the paradigm just, it's not that I want to break it because I think that it's evil or bad or what, it's just
100%.
My brain just does not compute with the current paradigm, and I don't see it. And so that's how we are shifting the paradigm, is because we're just not seeing it anymore. And so we're not hooked into it. And so we can't not break the paradigm because we can only see a new paradigm. Would you agree with me? Because I feel
100%.
People seem to think that we're on this mission to to save the world from itself and save people from business. And I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, we just don't see. Like, I get lost on the track. Like, if I go on into the wilderness and I go trail running or hiking or whatever, I continuously get off the track. And everybody's like, but how can you not see it? And I'm like, my eyes literally does not compute. Like, I don't see it. And I see trails that I follow, and then I end up in weird places and go, oh shit, it wasn't a trail. But that's what my brain computes. It's the weirdest thing. And I feel like everything in life has become like that for me. I just don't see what other people see anymore.
Agree. Pretty much with everything that you're putting around the use of the words break the paradigm, because I've never believed that there's something necessarily wrong. It's just that I want to do it differently, and that's what brings me happiness. And I used to think I needed to say, I'm sorry, I don't fit in. Back to the apologetic piece, right? But I wonder if we just don't give ourselves permission to explore life in that way, because I wonder if there's just pure creativity within that, right? So the creativity is allowing ourselves to explore the way you said. And it's not of a breaking of the old or trying to save the world. Yeah, no, I've been through that stage. We could have coffee and wine over that one, right? Where I really, thought that whatever I was going to be doing was going to save the world. Nobody's job is to save the world. Our job is to proverbially save ourselves, which really means stepping into enjoying our lives and being ourselves, right? And I totally see that and agree, because it's fun for me. It's fun to think, okay, well, what else could we do here, and what else do I want to do? Which to me is what breaking the paradigm for me was, because I put a pretty big box around myself on where I felt I needed to be and how I should be. And so as you undo that box, if you choose, right, you're only really breaking the self paradigm, if you want to go to that language, which makes more sense to me, of what you think you are.
Oh my God. And once you do that, everything changes. It's humbling and liberating and joyous and a little scary, and
Yep.
and learning to trust self has been huge for me on this journey. Learning to be happy was huge for me. Learning to be worthy, that I am worthy, and that I get to have fun, and that life gets to feel good, and that there's nothing to prove to anybody else.
Yep.
There's nobody to impress, because actually it's none of their business, and they're not as interested as what we think they are. And when they are, they're probably the people that need to be more interested in their own lives. So for me, it's always that if you have time to sit and criticize me, like you should maybe rather go and find some joy in your life, because I don't have time to look around and criticize other people anymore. Like, when people say you have to compare yourself to others, I'm like, why? I don't want to do what anybody else is doing anymore, and I don't want to necessarily think like everybody else is thinking anymore. My life is way more fun with me just living my life.
Yeah. And to me, that last statement is the core of what we're missing often within, I'm going to call it humanity, because of whatever belief patterns, right, that created to believe that I'll use mine, right, had to give of myself to make my happiness and not have fun. So I'm with you. I'm 54, learning to have fun again, to laugh again, to enjoy what I'm doing, and trust that all of that is part of life and part of the journey, and not segregate that aspect of myself anymore.
We could talk for the whole day, and we've been going for a while. So I'm going to start wrapping this up for our listeners. What do you take an unapologetic stand for in the world?
For me, the answer is very simple: an unapologetic stand for me being me.
Now, I always invite the listeners to connect, but I'm going to be a little cheeky today. Who would be interesting people for you to connect with? And then how do they connect with you?
Oh my God. I love people who explore the world differently, who enjoy standing in their own unique, energetic, I'm going to call it blueprint of who they are. People who are open to looking at the world and doing things differently, and those who are called to love. Those are my big jing jings that get me turned on and excited.
And how do they connect with you?
Great question. I would say right now, LinkedIn is one of the easiest. Look up Andrea Leigh Austin. That's why the Leigh, because there's not that many of us, lots of Andrea Austins. You can always go through one of our websites, mycw.ca, which is our organization, or loveevolution.ca. So I'm going to get a little more vocal in my own environment and start sharing things I feel and sense, just like we're doing today. And I'm really looking forward to connecting more with people, and in my language, sharing more love with the world so they can do so too.
It all does come down to divine love, doesn't it? It all comes down, like, divine love is the answer to everything. And I know it sounds so corny, and I really had to live decades before I got it on a bone marrow level, that love really is, divine love really is the answer to everything. Yeah. My friend, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm going to listen to this again afterwards, because there's a lot that I want to actually hear for myself. This has been sensational as always. I'm so looking forward to the next one. And to our listeners, thank you so much for your time. And I would love to hear from you. What are you taking away from this conversation? Because God knows this has gone everywhere. So what is it that actually stood out for you? What resonated for you? What didn't resonate for you? What are the things that you were listening to and you thought, oh my God, these girls are smoking something? Because we're really open to that as well. We don't just want people that go, yeah. Like, we love having the different conversations as well. And in that, we are very like-hearted. And then we look forward to another rich conversation next week. And until then, don't forget, you get to live your legacy unleashed, unlimited, and unapologetic. Have an amazing day further. Cheers.